now. So a little bit about sort of my background and what I feel like, positions mean, an awkward at times position. So you've heard about my Haifa University leg, which is, me being a law professor here. But I also have a dual appointment, and I spend much of my time at the City University of New York, where I first moved to 20, I don't want to age shame myself, or so years ago. And so I get to, live anti-Semitism as an Israeli, kind of seeing this, how it plays out outside in the big world, but also as an American Jew living on campus, kind of, experiencing this in my New York capacity. And so I feel like this dual life kind of exposes me to different perspectives that at times I sense that not necessarily everyone on the other side sees. Why? Because in Israel, Jews are the majority, and this cultural difference is a very significant one that many of us, particularly in a group that sort of started organically shortly after October 7th, in which Sagit is a part of, Shlomi is a part of, and approximately 15 other people that you've seen roaming the hallways here, kind of found it organically as one friend kind of reached out to another Israeli academic, and we've found ourselves a few dozens of people, including Shai Davidai and a few that became more notoriously known on social media for their activities, kind of battling this sense of we're used to being the majority, but the mindset here is different, and so it's a little bit harder to activate, fellow American Jews or, Jews in diaspora, because they don't have that sense of security that many of us growing up in Israel have about our identity and take for granted. And so this subtle but very significant difference is something that we've noticed is very visible and very much impacting the way people behave and respond to security threats that dominate now daily life, for diaspora Jews, for, internal social, all sorts of tensions among academics, among colleagues, among students, among friends. And of course, this sense of where do you put yourself on the Zionist scale? Are you proud to say you're a Zionist? Are you not sure what Zionist even means? Where do you see your home? Can you be a non-Israeli Jew, but still proud of Israel or your Jewish heritage? And that fine balance is something that I've sort of found myself dealing with a lot in the last 3 years. And so while people here might be worried about rockets and think that, worrying about whether I should wear my David Star of David necklace or not in the subway is a big deal or not, it is a big deal to a lot of people that can't find themselves being publicly Jewish like they used to be, or they want to be now, given everything that has been unfolding. And so what we've kind of seen is how, this daily minority experiences really shapes how public you are in your identity. And as you've heard Sagit say before, approximately 3/4 of Jewish students are not comfortable being publicly Jewish anymore because they feel intimidated. And this doesn't mean that it ends with students. As you just heard from Michael, it could also be, what do my colleagues think? Do they think I'm this genocidal freak? Am I going to be silenced in meetings? If I go to conferences, will they ask me about how strong of a Zionist or not am I? And so all these different types of feelings, kind of exploded for me in the last 3 years, whether it's because hate crimes have been on the rise, in particular in places like Canada, but also in New York, which is the second biggest Jewish city in the world, nominally speaking, after Tel Aviv. And, foreign influence campaigns, social polarization, not just online, but in the subway, in class, in the cafeteria, in my kids' schools, right? And so we've seen this experience to kind of really be a multi-dimensional one, with many of us in the academic circles talking about the horseshoe of anti-Semitism, kind of needing to deal, certainly in the US, with the far left and the far right sort of like closing in on us from both sides for various reasons, kind of different ideologies that come together for one outcome. And so where did this catch me, sort of wearing multiple hats, right? So, I have my professor hat, I have the mother hat, I have the Forbes columnist hat that I don't want to burn because I want to keep the column, but I also want to make an impact, right? And, I have my mentor hat for Jewish students mainly, and more so than ever before, as they reach out to me, like many other colleagues that are still publicly Jewish, wanting that umbrella, treatment or protection and sort of guidance. And as a researcher, and also I've found that I have started pacing up and kind of enhancing my involvement with different Jewish organizations, whether it's Hillel on our campus or Chabad in particular. I have been more involved in the different Chabads in New York, Chabad Chelsea in particular, but many of them. The Israeli Scouts, which is a very, very powerful organization, in particular in big cities in the US where much Zionist work has been done in the last 3 years, kind of enhancing how the next generation feels about their identity and creating a safe space for people to really come together and mobilize. And if we used to have just group chats or organizations that were for the kids or their parents, now we have the Israeli Scouts community, which is like a bigger umbrella-like organization that anyone that has any desire to be a part of participates in, whether it's speakers from Israel or all sorts of calls for actions that we do. IAC, which Hagit is involved with, has also started doing teens and kids programs that my kids have been very involved with as well, and of course mentoring Israeli and Jewish students. And this is my daughter, who celebrated her bat mitzvah 2 weeks after October 7th, in which we were not sure if we should continue the celebration or not. This is 2 weeks in addition to a prayer for the soldiers and a prayer for Israel and a prayer for the Jews all over the world. What do we do? First of all, we need a lot of security. We need a lot of security because we were very nervous. And someone was talking the other day about how, here in the conference, how people from other countries or other religions don't really think of this as naturally as we do. We have a Jewish-related event. We need a lot of security, right? This is something that we are very mindful of. No one else does, right? Because what if they hear a Hebrew song in the street and then they come to get all the guests and come for us, right? And so I knew immediately after October 7th, everything is going to change, including my kids' life, and we need to start preparing them for what's to come. And as many people just like me kind of had that same thought, gathered together in Washington, D.C. for what was in early November 2023, the big event that we had multiple speakers and everyone sort of coming together from all communities in North America. My colleague Billy, who sits right here, myself, and hundreds of other New Yorkers were stranded waiting for 12 buses that were no-show to pick us up. Why? Because the vendors didn't want to drive Jews to this event. And people were shocked. How is this possible that in the capitalistic America, businesses would rather not make money or subject themselves to lawsuits than deliver when it comes to Jews, right? And I think to many this was a big critical moment when they realized things are different now, right? And so it took a while to kind of explain this. I was interviewing about this in the media and really kind of capturing this moment because Israel's brand at that point in time was almost immediately ruined. On October 8th, there were demonstrations in Times Square. A day, we were still collecting, trying to figure out, Kochav hasn't even thought of what would need to be done, right? But already people were telling me, Israel is an apartheid state. They have no laws. Arabs can't be justices or nominated to any senior positions. I found myself talking literally to people that I know from professional circles saying, this is not true. I clerked in the Israeli Supreme Court, actually for a justice that is Arab. And, here we're talking about lived experience, right? But to no avail. And so I think at that point in time, many of us started realizing we need to start coming together. And calls for actions have started, whether it's demonstrations, weekly events in New York that I've been involved with mainly the first year, calling for the hostages' return, trying to organize weekly walks in the park, Run for Their Lives, all sorts of events like that. As I mentioned, the Israeli Scouts stepped it up, started doing all these different camps and also big events for the parents, for others in the larger community, trying to kind of figure out what can we do, how can we help, where can we fundraise, what strategies can we come up with to protect the kids? Is there a lot of bias and indoctrination going on in the K-12 level, which shortly after we all realized, yes, this is definitely very much happening. And then, this, of course, escalated to the last few months in which, and I was in this demonstration as well outside of Park East Synagogue with our current mayor, kind of trying to push for two legislations with regards to protesting outside of schools as well as outside of places of worship. One, he wasn't able to pass because of a super veto. The other one did pass. There was some intervention from the state that kind of, extended the minimal distance requirement of how far can you protest outside of schools, but still not what many in the Jewish community have hoped. But it has become clear that things are very, very different. What can we do? What have I been doing also as an academic? So a few years ago, I collaborated with the Israel Institute that I'm sure many of you are familiar with here, and if not, just Google them and kind of make a mental note to yourself to check their offerings and what you could do with them, whether it's an Israeli scholar teaching in the US or whether it's a scholar teaching elsewhere in the world that is getting a grant from them to develop a course related to Israel. And I developed a course that was called, for a small section at CUNY, that was called From Silicon Valley to Silicon Wadi, which is essentially the nickname for Israel. We have Silicon Alley, which is New York, Silicon Wadi, which is Tel Aviv. And I really tried with this small section of honor students that I have viewed as more open-minded and intellectually curious, to kind of talk about Israel in a different way, from the startup nation perspective, from what can we learn from their successes. And I found it to be very effective. I'm hoping to teach that course again soon. I ran it twice, and I felt it was a good but not too imposing experience, kind of collecting their thoughts on things that I research and teach anyway, from fintech to AI innovation, blockchain, digital governance, tech policy, and financial regulation, but kind of, utilizing Israel as an ongoing case study of, what good entrepreneurship looks like, what innovation looks like, what culturally stimulating each other could be, and what have you. And I also tried to shift my research from these topics, as I purely researched them in the past, to make them a little bit more relevant. Much like Michael, I'm not an anti-Semitism scholar. I haven't really done that before October 7th, but to kind of harness what I'm doing to make an impact, or kind of at least, incorporate many of my concerns and the things I'm worried about. And I also try to do that in my columns. So for example, a topic I've been researching in the last couple of years, prediction markets, I kind of tried in a few columns, one of which you see here now, to talk about how manipulating democracy using all sorts of tech tools could backfire, could have negative consequences, not accusing the New York City Mayor Mamdani, but also suggesting that with the right influence, with the right tech tools, with the right manipulative schemes, you could result in manipulating democracy in ways that are not desired, obviously not just for us as Jews, but for the broader population. And this, of course, is based on actual research and content. So it's, I try to base my columns on actual substantially referenced work, so that it's not pure opinions or speculations. In that case, it was all sorts of potential blockchain-based foreign wallets that were kind of with low volatility markets, trying to shape the percentages of what the mayor's chances were right in the weeks leading to the election. So the people would be like, why do I even need to get out of my bed and go vote? I think 93% of New Yorkers are voting for him. Of course, people didn't really understand at that time what the numbers meant, what they're based on, how they could be changed, and things like that. I also urged all my students to become more, and of course myself and my circles, to become more politically involved. First of all, vote, just go out and vote. So this is a message that I think many of us in the Jewish community around the world have really come to understand, the importance of really being involved. Certainly if there's a candidate that is preferable to the other, in New York, for example, we have Richie Torres, who's very supportive of Israel, of the Jewish community, in the final, weeks of the elections to New York, right? Many of us kind of teamed up and did whatever we can. Many of these things we were done too little, too late. So I think the lessons are just they're just starting to kind of be better understood and learned from at this point. Anti-Semitism also became personal to me as a scholar. So for example, with a few others in a consortium that we kind of tried to submit a proposal to Horizon, a European big grant that I'm sure some of you are familiar with. My two co-authors sadly informed me that the universities are not supporting my involvement because I'm an Israeli scholar. And so this was something that I had to experience as a scholar as well, and try to find ways around it and kind of increase awareness and figure out different ways. In my writing, in my school, I've also in New York tried with many of my colleagues, two of them, Debbie and Billy are here, kind of tried to fight things like Hillel getting sanctioned in other schools, impacting our school, and we were able with the help of many of us kind of coming together to push back against this and not make Hillel get sanctioned. So a little bit of a shout out also to Michelle, who organized the last big anti-Semitism conference I went to, in which I also presented some of the scholarship that now hopefully in our own new anti-Semitism studies lab at Baruch will be developing more, and of course here, and a big shout out to Shlomi and the team here for all that they've been doing. And last but not least, involvement in the community in whatever we can do, whether it's Israeli businesses or Jewish businesses that need help in mobilizing, use the same circles and the same groups, students, colleagues. Last but not least, as I wrap this up, why does my research that is not on these topics matter? So you heard from Michael that every single one of us can kind of put whatever skill sets they have into this. And so the stuff that I've been writing about, social media, foreign influence, finance, fintech, AI, democracy, right? It all comes together. Some of the projects that I've been presenting, for example, at Cardozo, memory pollution, digital infrastructure, and the integrity of Jewish collective memory, kind of talking about how data is being collected, where it's aggregated, all sorts of new platforms. We're not even thinking about the risk that they present, and where they collect that data and how it influences not just the Wikipedias of the world, but also knowledge collection and storage. And that's something I hope to be publishing in a law review in the next few months. Another piece of scholarship that I have with Dr. Ori Freeman, who's sitting up there, is on the algorithmic financialization of terrorism, kind of looking at different layers of not noticed, but when put together, very concerning digital fundraising stack that serves our enemies and people that want to harm us to fundraise and advance bad things against us. And looking forward, kind of echoing what Michael said before, I think all of us could do so much. It does take a village. We're still figuring out, they say, 3 Jews, 10 opinions. But we're really, we're trying to kind of figure out ways to do this. And I think everyone can harness whatever skill set they have into working together, seeing where they can contribute, whether it's scholarship, calls for action, teaching, all of the above, right? We can all help. And one thing that we can help as we finish today is really not ending the conversation here. So I think Shlomi and the team is going to be sending everyone that was at least in the legal track a Google Doc with some information that we can all add each other. We're going to open a LinkedIn group as well, so that we can start, when you post a post on LinkedIn, you can also just post it in that group, and then people could comment, and we have this live, active, community going on. We can share events, we can share thoughts, we can, do calls for papers, calls for actions, and kind of continue the conversation. If any of you thinks of, anyone here thinks of anything that is relevant to the rest of us, whether it's a conference, whether it's a project that you need help fundraising for, whether it's some type of an exchange for students, for scholars, whatever we in our capacities could do to help, this would be just the beginning. So with that, I'll leave you to think about what you could do. Thanks.